So before we get going, new podcast in the description after like a week and a half or something. I just appreciated LeBron for like 10 minutes because sometimes I feel like there's unnecessary negativity whenever he does something cool. And then I talked about Childish Gambino's new video, This Is America, which is quite a statement for a song/vid. Now if we can get to what is probably going to end up being the Western Conference Finals. I know both of these teams are still in 3-1 series at the moment, but I'm going to assume that they win their series. You can make the argument that this is basically the NBA Finals, the Rockets and the Warriors. And there's quite a lot to get to, so hopefully I don't end up rambling on too much, and hopefully this doesn't end up being like a 35-minute video, but we'll see what happens. And I'll say now, like, this is me doing a little extra bit after I've already done this entire video, and just thinking back on what you're about to hear me say over the next like 20 minutes. I do think I'm a little disrespectful to how good of a three-point shooter Trevor Ariza is. He's been above league average for a while now. He was very good last year in the playoffs. So, as you hear me say, well, they could risk leaving Ariza open. This is me recognizing, he's a little better than I'm giving him credit for. Where would I even start with this? I guess we can start with how is Golden State going to defend Houston, just because the Rockets have the best offense in the league and all that. And you start with James Harden, of course. I have to think that if there's any team who has at least one guy who can defend Harden one-on-one, it would be the Warriors. And my pick for that guy would be Iguodala, because he's actually been moving around well. But I have to assume that Draymond does not start at center, and as a result, Iguodala does not start in these games for them. Unless this Iguodala at point guard thing maintained itself, but I don't think it's going to. So while he may end up playing, 30 minutes a game, probably more than that, let's be real. So for the stretches where he isn't, it's going to be between Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant and Draymond when he gets switched on to him, I'm sure. I would like to think that these guys have the combination that you need to, one, just stop some of the James Harden step-back threes. And that's the thing that makes him so impossible to guard at this point is we already know how good he is at attacking the rim, but then when he can just hit those step-backs on you, what are you going to do at that point? The guy can go forward or he can go backward, and he's going to score regardless. So you have to pressure him when he's at the three-point line. You can't give him even a room of space. And I think these guys can be that. Just disrupt him and force a couple of misses or make him not even attempt as many step-back threes. That's step one. And I do think a lot of that is still dependent on Iguodala being himself. I mean, if he's going to be the great defender that he's supposed to be, then it's got to be in this series, because if that's not the case, there's a decent chance they lose this thing. So that's number one. Next, if you do pressure Harden, he's going to get by you. He's going to get into the teeth of the defense and do all that stuff effectively. And that's one of the reasons why Houston's so tough to defend is last year, they were very reliant on pick and rolls. And if you figured out how to defend the pick and roll, then, you kind of had them beat, as we saw with the Spurs. But now, even if you figure out how to defend that, they'll just run ISOs. So that just opens up a new thing you got to deal with. I mean, if you're Golden State and Harden's getting by some of your guys, which is going to happen, and Harden's going to put up his point totals, I don't really picture a star player on either team playing significantly worse than we'd expect them to. But what you do if you're Golden State is you probably dare some of Houston's non-natural shooters to beat you, right? PJ Tucker, Mbah Moute. You could potentially help off of Clint Capella, but he's usually standing in the right spot to receive Harden alley-oops or Chris Paul alley-oops. I mean, basically everything I'm saying about Harden right now can apply to CP3 as well. But you got to bring the help. You got to dare some of those non-shooters, well, quote-unquote non-shooters to beat you. But the thing is, those guys have been making threes this year. PJ Tucker has been a very good corner three-point shooter. Ariza's still above average. And then Mbah Moute has actually been pretty okay as well. But with all that being said, if the reason why you lose the series if you're the Warriors is because PJ Tucker just kept nailing three-pointers, but your defensive strategy was like what you'd want it to be. I mean, at a certain point, you just have to accept we were not going to win that series, you know? Now, I'm not saying totally ignore PJ Tucker. You can still close out on him. You can have another defender rotate over to him. I mean, the timing's got to be precise on all these things, but I'm just saying, there's definitely some wiggle room with some of these guys. So, there's that. Now, that's when Houston runs isolation. And I think that might really be the only way that you can defend that. It's pressure Harden. If you can make his job getting to the rim off of the initial pressure just a little more difficult, great. And then after that, you got to be content with someone else who is not as good as him beating you. Now if we can get to when Houston actually runs pick and rolls, which they still do a decent amount of the time, when Draymond is at the center position, you can pretty much switch everything. And Draymond on Harden, I think you're content with that if you are Golden State. I think Draymond, he might have a better chance of not letting Harden get to the basket just because he's a big body and he moves super well laterally. I don't know if Draymond would have as much success defending the step backs, but well, I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving Draymond enough credit. He's got super long arms, and he's a great natural defender, so maybe he'd still be okay there. So, I mean, that's your best bet there. Now, on the flip side, let's say if, like Klay Thompson or Iguodala is defending Harden, and then you switch, and then it becomes one of those guys on Clint Capella, right? Is there a chance that you could get killed there? Potentially. I mean, Capella is definitely going to be a nuisance on the offensive boards in this series, and that's something that the Warriors are going to have to really care about. I mean, I know in the NBA Finals last season, they had Zaza do a pretty decent job of just boxing out Tristan Thompson all the time, but do you really want to have Zaza out there that often versus this Houston team, where sometimes you're just going to be forced to switch? I mean, he's so bad on defense, you just might not be able to play him. Same thing with JaVale McGee. I mean, the centers in this series may end up just being Kevon Looney, Draymond, and then David West for a few minutes here and there. And that just may be all we're going to see from the Warriors, you know? So, I mean, it's an interesting conversation, you know, the switching and what that does to your rebounding and all that stuff. Other options for the pick and roll. I mean, do you back up on the screen? I do think you can still get James Harden in this like awkward position where he doesn't really want to shoot a mid-range, but Utah tried to do that, I believe, in the previous game, and Houston was kind of content with shooting like pull-ups, and of course, Chris Paul will gladly shoot pull-up mid-rangers all day, so if the Warriors' strategy is just to back up on it all the time, then you give it to CP3. But once again, like I said, even if the Warriors do manage to really disrupt Houston's pick-and-roll style, then they'll just run isolation on you, and then it becomes a whole different game. So, there's that. Ultimately, I think Houston's going to get a lot of the baskets they want to get in this thing. I think they've even been developing some off-ball stuff. They don't run it too often, because most of the time they don't have to. But we saw like some Clint Capella, James Harden cutting stuff against Utah in the last game. I think Eric Gordon also matters in this series, definitely. I mean, if the Warriors are leaving like someone like Trevor Ariza open and he's not killing them, you can bring Gordon into the game, and then you have Gordon at the 2, Harden at the 3. I believe the 3 guards together has been like a devastating lineup for them this year. I mean, pretty much all their lineups are devastating, but I think that one's even a level above. Yeah, I mean, Houston's got a lot of options. They're going to put some points up on the board, no doubt about it, but I do think the Warriors probably have the best chance in the league of disrupting them. Well, them and then the Spurs if they had a healthy Kawhi Leonard. So, yeah. I guess the flip side now, how are the Rockets going to defend the Warriors? I mean, the Rockets switch everything at this point, and I believe they're going to start with Harden, CP3, Ariza, PJ Tucker, and then Clint Capella. I mean, Clint Capella's legit, man. His ability to switch on stuff is pretty damn good, and the Warriors, with all their off-ball action, and the fact that you can play pretty okay defense, and then they're just still going to hit some threes over you anyway, or Durant's just going to go ISO and kill you, or Steph Curry, if he's healthy, can just beat you off the dribble. You kind of have to switch against them, because even giving them a sliver of space can be enough for them to put some points on the board. And I think Capella is really showing out defensively in these playoffs, where he's able to defend on the perimeter pretty okay. And yeah, sure, you don't want it to happen all the time, because eventually the dude's going to get beat on like Steph Curry ISOs or whatever. But I think he's good enough to not just get torched when he's out there, which is huge. But actually, if I can keep on Capella for a moment here, his stamina is going to be a thing. I don't know if it's because he has stamina issues or because he just plays so damn hard that it's inevitable that he just can't be in the game for that long. I mean, we saw it with Joel Embiid, or we're seeing it because they won that game, so that series isn't technically over yet. It's tough to ask a center to like step out of the paint on defense and then still do a lot on offense. Now, of course, Capella doesn't do as much as Embiid does on offense, but there's a chance he could get gassed a bit in this series, and if there's a 15-minute stretch where Capella is not in there, and he can't make your switching easier, and he can't grab offensive rebounds, and he can't roll to the rim, and he can't catch alley-oops from Harden and CP3, that could be the difference in the series, you know? So, we're going to have to see what happens with Capella. My guess would be he's able to get above his league, or his season average, which I believe was like high 20s. And he could probably creep into the mid-30s. That's what I'm going to guess. He's been playing 32 minutes a game in the playoffs so far, so yeah, there's that. But still, that might not be enough. The Warriors are so damn good, you may need Clint Capella to play 40 minutes a game, and I don't know if he can do that. Now, when the Warriors do run some pick and roll, which they don't do a lot of, they're the least pick and roll team in the NBA. And it has been a bit of a criticism that they've had in the past, which is, when the game gets close late, which doesn't happen too often for them, but it does sometimes, they still like to run their beautiful basketball, and it's great, but sometimes you just need to give the ball to Steph Curry or Kevin Durant and just run some simple play, right? I think some of it goes back to Capella once again, ability to switch that. You can't really go under on these guys, so you pretty much have to switch. But you could also try to trap. You dare Draymond to beat you. You dare Iguodala to beat you from outside. When Livingston's in there, you're going to leave him open. Quinn Cook. Was he a good shooter this season, Cook? Yeah, he was. He was a pretty damn good one, but you're still going to dare him to beat you sometimes because it's always a better option than Clay or KD or Steph, right? So there are some guys here that you can dare to beat you on this Warriors team. And then when the Warriors go small and when Draymond is at the 5, I think that's going to be some of the more interesting things. I've already said I think you can have Capella take advantage of Draymond somewhat on the offensive boards. But the other thing is PJ Tucker. And PJ could be playing some center against Draymond, and from a physical standpoint, I think he does kind of match up there, and I guess the lineup would be, I don't know, there's a few different options. There's Harden and CP3 are going to be in there, and Tucker's at center. You could go Ariza and Bahamute, you could go Gordon Ariza, you could go Gordon and Bahamute, those three guys pretty much. I think that's just going to be dependent on who's making shots, whose defense isn't killing you, because Gordon's actually not a bad defender. But still, if PJ Tucker is at center, then I think he could have the ability to box out Draymond. He may be able to bother Draymond a bit on the offensive boards, and then he could also switch the screen and all that stuff. Now on the flip side, it also allows Draymond to not really defend PJ Tucker that much, and allowing Draymond to free roam can be pretty devastating to score against. I know in this series against the Pelicans, I don't remember what game it was, Draymond defended Rondo, and he didn't respect his jumper too much, and I remember seeing a stat on Twitter. It was like the Pelicans just couldn't score at all in those situations, so there's many nuances to this series. Ultimately, I think it's going to be which guys who you dare to leave open are going to make their threes. Is PJ Tucker going to go nuts from the corner? Is Mbah Moute going to make them? Is Ariza going to make them? Is Iguodala going to make them? I don't know how many Draymond's really going to shoot. I think his first instinct is to go off the dribble towards the basket and make a play for someone. And then as far as the stars are concerned, I mean, the Warriors could definitely attack James Harden some. That's going to be an interesting thing because with how much switching Houston does, if you could get Curry on him or Durant on him and just go at him one-on-one, tire him out and all that, kind of like what Cleveland did to Steph Curry a couple years back in the finals, and they attempted to do it this previous year. It's definitely a move you can go with. If you can get KD switched onto CP3, I know Chris Paul's actually not a bad post defender, if I believe, but KD's so damn tall it might not matter. So many interesting things, man. And I guess because I just brought up the idea of attacking Harden, you flip that, the idea of attacking Steph Curry. I mean, Steph's gotten pretty damn good at hedging the pick and roll because the Cavs tried it and they were able to disrupt it because Steph Curry is a very good team defender. Hopefully we all realize that by now. This Steph Curry sucks on defense narrative that's been wrong for every time someone said it. Hopefully that's not still a thing. But then again, he does have, the ankle or whatever it is. That could definitely be a thing in this series. You know, if he's a step slow defensively, if he's not able to rotate like that, if he's not able to get that burst on offense, that could be the difference. And I guess the last thing I can talk about is the head coaches between D'Antoni and Steve Kerr. I hope Steve Kerr doesn't mess around, because the one criticism that you can throw at Kerr is sometimes he gets really stupid with the rotations. As in starting JaVale McGee against the Pelicans, playing Anderson Varejao for those 5 minutes or whatever they were in Game 7 against the Cavs, and taking too long to get to the Draymond at center lineup. On the flip side, I think D'Antoni is pretty robotic almost with his rotations, where he's like, okay, this is our rotation, we're going to stick to this, and he's got a little bit of wiggle room, sure, but for the most part, you know what Houston's going to do, and I'm sure they're going to bust out the PJ Tucker at center lineup at some point, but I like that D'Antoni doesn't mess around as much. Maybe he'll play Gerald Green too many minutes in this thing, I don't know. But I do think the Steve Kerr doing something stupid with the rotation is on the table. With all these things being said, we're nearly 20 minutes in at this point. I think I'm going to go with the Warriors in 6 games, because I think the top-end talent is just a little too much for Houston to deal with. I think Houston's going to give them problems. I wouldn't be shocked if it went 7. And if it goes 7, Houston may win this thing, because then that's in Houston. But I think Curry and Durant are just simply going to be a little too good for the Rockets to deal with. And I also think Houston relies a little bit more on the guys who could have bad shooting nights than the Warriors do, right? Because PJ Tucker's going to play a lot. Trevor Ariza is going to play a lot. And I do think there's a little bit more wiggle room for those guys to struggle, whereas with the Warriors, they could just play the big four 42 minutes, and the only guy you really got to worry about is Iguodala. Because even if you leave Draymond open from 3, he's going to go off the bounce, he's going to go inside. So, yeah. Now, if PJ Tucker just makes all of his threes, then I guess Houston's going to win this. So, I'm going Warriors in 6. I look forward to it. It should be fun. I would love for it to go 7, you know. But that's it. Warriors, Rockets. Effectively the NBA Finals. And I'm done. Once again, new podcast, appreciating LeBron James and how awesome he is in his 15th season or whatever it is. And then Childish Gambino's This Is America.